very urban, a fascist, an anti-Semite if ever was one, in the sense of anti-Jewish, and the greatest supporter of Israel. Leaders of fascism in France and Italy are great supporters. The EDL is now donning itself with Israeli flag in demonstrations. So, yes, I don't know if to call them strange fellow travelers, rather than maybe the genuine fellow travelers of a racist ideology. Now, the second, the first and the third question, as I said, had a lot in it. Three very short points about it. One, as an academic, I'm talking about the beginning of the end of the Zionist project. And the beginning of an end is a long period, can be a long period, unfortunately. And when structures, ideological structure collapse, it can take time in terms of historical time. And these are very dangerous times, because the attempt to keep the structure together can make the leaders of the structure even more brutal and fierce. We saw it in the last days of apartheid South Africa. So we are into a very bad period in the next year or two, very worrying, not only for the people of the Gaza Strip, but also for the people of the West Bank, who already are beginning to feel the genocidal policies there, and the Palestinian minority in Israel that usually is totally forgotten in these kind of conversations. 2 million people are also in danger, existential danger. However, in historical terms, the end is coming, and the collapse is coming. In fact, the 7th of October is like an earthquake that shook a building that already had cracks in the foundation, but it widened the cracks extensively. And therefore, I think this accelerates the collapse. What will come instead of the collapse is a very good question, because we have a failed state in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen. Not always the collapse of the state is needed for something better. There are decolonizations in Africa and Southeast Asia that were not replaced by better regimes for the people. It's the agency of the Palestinian national movement. We are waiting for its finding the way of uniting its forces, restructuring probably its liberation organization. I have a lot of faith in the younger Palestinian generation that they would be able to provide the consensual leadership and structure. We need them to lead the way into the future. It's high time that the Israeli Jews would hear from the Palestinians what they think about the future, rather than the Palestinians hearing all the time what the Israelis think about the future, responding to this. We need this leadership. The potential of this leadership is there. I think from the days that Rada's grandfather was, we have now a very sophisticated, educated, well-versed young Palestinian generation all over the place, and they would show us the way forward. And it would be a free Palestine, and probably quite a lot of Israeli Jews would feel they don't want to live in a post-apartheid state, like some whites didn't want to live in a post-apartheid state. This is not a good enough reason not to pray for this. They might leave or they might stay. It's not the main issue. The main issue is, can we liberate Palestine, and can the liberation bring a much better political structure and life, first for the Palestinians, but also for the Jews who are there, and maybe also influence the rest of the Arab world.
Thank you. And Rada?
Yeah, just a couple of additional points on that last point, on the question of the future state that would replace the current state of Israel. I mean, two issues which are really very important. First of all, the aim of a democratic state in which the people who live within it are equal citizens is, it seems to me, is inevitable. If providing that the Israelis are not enabled to ethnically cleanse the Palestine so that there are Palestinians remaining, it seems to me there is no escape from this as an endpoint. Not talking in terms of how wonderful and all the rest. Really, it is inevitable. That's the first thing. The second issue that I wanted to follow up on what Ilan was saying, there really is a problem for the Palestinians about leadership. It's very paralyzing to all the excellent ideas, the energies that have been released by October 7th, and the way people are, and the enthusiasm, that wave of newly energized. It's sad but true that there is an absence of leadership, and this is extremely serious. I personally don't know exactly how it will be resolved, but I know that without it, all these aims, ideas, and so on will not be realized.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with both Ilan and Rada. I think and on the question of agency, the Palestinian agency is essential, i.e., Palestinians would have to take the leading role. I do expect some Israelis to join us, and I do think we can see fractures within that Israeli society. But settler colonial societies actually don't change easily, and don't change quickly, and don't change for the better. And it's certainly becoming slightly more fascist and more racist and more out of touch with reality. And a lot of Israeli liberals are moving out, and who is remaining within Israel is more fanatical. But I do think actually that Palestinian society it has been resisting for a whole century now. And generation after generation, that society does bring up new leadership. But the current octogenarian leadership in Palestine is not working, and I do agree with Rada. And that leadership, quality of leadership, the caliber of the Mandelas and the Tutus, and it has got to emerge from within that society, enormous amount of energies. And that society does throw up new generation and new leadership. It's a question of watching the signs but I do think along the lines also there are many threats to us Palestinians, and the dangers haven't passed. I do think that isolated society, that boycotted society is more likely to continue its crimes, genocide, atrocities, attempts to ethnic cleanse Palestinians actually from parts of the West Bank. We know there's a war going on in the West Bank, which is not reported on the BBC, much of the focus on release of 4 Israeli hostages. Nobody mentioned the killing of 92 Palestinians at the same time, by the way. The British media hasn't mentioned that. So there's a lot of risk, danger, threats to us, crimes, genocide. And I think we need to be aware that the more that settler colonial society is isolated, the more it's likely to be savage, by the way, and the more it is likely to go, the question of crusaders and that sort of thing. So that the threats for us, existential threats for us as Palestinians are still there. But we are still there, half of us are still there, about 7.5 million Palestinians are still living between the river and the sea. And so I think potentially, we surviving and resisting and looking for long-term solutions, rather instant solutions or magical solutions or quick solutions or quick fixes within a year or two. I think we need to have a deep breath, and we Palestinians especially, we need to build up our own leadership and to think about slightly medium-term and long-term things, because I think if you expect magical solution and miraculous solutions after this horrific genocide in Gaza, I think you are going to be disappointed. So I think, it's a question of persistent, it's a question of we are incredibly resilient people, and I've seen so much resilience in Gaza itself, actually. How incredibly, the Palestinian resistance in Gaza for 8 months is something I did not expect. That resistance in Palestine will allow the international movement to grow and become bigger. Resist, you'll have support and you'll have solidarity. If we stop resisting, our solidarity will fade away, actually. So when we talk about these students, these mass movements, these mass things, I think they are linked to the question of resisting in Palestine. And that's the heart of the matter.
Thank you. Before I come to another round, just a couple of things. I was, the irony sometimes, the laughability sometimes. I mean, the fact that Israeli press, many headlines are celebrating the rise of far-right parties in the European elections, forgetting somehow that these are the fascists of yesterday, and they were the ones who drove the Jews out of Europe and created the pogroms and the such is in itself laughable. And also in regards with what you just said, Noor, and I think that most people here would agree. I mean, listening to the news just before I came on the BBC, and the statement by the US State Secretary, Antony Blinken, saying, it's a very novel event that 14 members have all said yes, and now everyone is waiting for Hamas. The whole world now is waiting for Hamas. I mean, I don't know whether he realized what he was saying, whether he was advised or not, but I think in retrospect, I think he said something that he would come to regret. But in any case, the next round of questions, the gentleman here. I will take the gentleman there next to the wall, and someone from the back. Yes, at the very back, the final row. So the gentleman here, please.
Thank you, Professor for supporting us. First question is: do you see any difference between governing in United States and Europe countries, Britain including, and do you think there are any, if Donald Trump come president, there will be support more from Biden to support Israel state? And finally, how do you see the problem now inside the Israeli society between the secularism and between the extreme Zionist regime? And we see yesterday Gallants resigned from Democrats, and Gallants don't vote against lower recruitment of Haredim. How do you see this would be influencing Israeli state?
Thank you. The gentleman there, fourth row next to the wall. Yes. No, if you can wait for the microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question is around a concept that I've been very puzzled with for the last 8 months around Muslim Zionists. Now, according to Islam and the Quran, it has been written according to various verses that Allah has stated clearly that Israel belongs to the Jews. So what I've understood is that according to the Hasbara that I have reviewed, Israel has positioned itself as the steward of anti-Islamization and that steward against the fight between the civilizations, the Western civilizations, and Islamic fundamentalism. So how do you view these claims that what the Muslim Zionists are saying, that the establishment of the existence of Israel is actually enshrined in the Quran? So I was asking, why did then Israeli planes, instead of distributing leaflets, distribute the verses of the Quran to the people in Gaza so that they could have vacated? Then they said one-fifth of the Israeli population are actually untrustworthy and they are hell-bent on the destruction of Israel, so they're only Arab Israelis. So what's your views on this Muslim Zionist?
Okay. The gentleman at the very back of the hall.
Hey, thank you. So I'm from Colombia. The Colombian president say if Palestine dies, humanity dies. So my question is, why I believe it's very important for all states to follow it, but my question is, how important it is to isolate the Zionist state if we want to build a better world?
Thank you. Okay, then.
Yeah. The first question was about the US and UK in differences.
Yeah.
Of course, there are differences because the United States political system works differently than the British system. For instance, the electoral system works differently, and therefore the lobbies for Israel and Zionism adapted themselves to the political reality. Also, lobbying in America is a bit more complex because it's part of the regular work of politics. But I think that despite these differences, it is the Anglo-Saxon world, if you want. You can include Australia in this. This whole section of Western civilization of the English-speaking world, and they have their allies, of course, in the continent as well, that decided to deal with the racism that they have shown for centuries against the Jews by getting easily out of this really dark history by supporting the colonization of Palestine and now the destruction of Palestine. So, sorry. So I think while there are tactical differences and characteristical differences because of the different political realities and system, it is, as I say in the book, I talk about it as a relay race that you have in the Olympics, when one runner passes the baton to another runner. So in many ways, Britain passed the baton to America as being the major international actor that provides immunity. So, but in the book itself, you can see more about the differences. Second question was about Donald Trump. I think one of the problems of the lobby in America would be that they have, as I show in the book, they have decided, probably since 2005, to put almost all the eggs in the basket of the Republican Party and are less interested in the Democratic Party, although they can see that the inertia of being pro-Israeli in the Democratic Party of a certain generation still works. But where I think they might be wrong is that they don't fully understand the difference in the Republican camp between the supremacist right-wing conservatives and the Christian Zionists. Christian Zionists probably would support Israel, but there is an isolationist element in the Republican Party. For example, those who did not want to support the Ukraine, not in the sense of not supporting it symbolically, but refused to use American taxpayer to pay money for weapons going to the Ukraine and Israel, if you remember, when it was together. So I think it's, I was in the heart of Arab America, in Michigan, Dearborn, and I was asked again and again, what do you suggest to us? Should we vote for Trump or Biden or not vote, which is actually voting? And of course, you're very careful in not being an American to tell people how to vote. But I said, unfortunately, this is a tactical question and not a strategic question. Namely, both of them are bad news for the Palestinians. And both of them, at least initially, are good news for the fascist Israel that is unfolding in front of our eyes. However, and therefore I suggested investing more in strategic thinking rather than in the tactical question of whom to vote for in November and leave it for people individually to decide what to do, because the two choices are terrible. There is no real independent candidate, unfortunately, in America they could go for. The question of the implosion of the Israeli society from within, I think I write about it in the book as well, towards the end of the book, this kind of what I call the state of Judea, the settler state that is taking over Israel, a more theocratic, more extreme version of Zionism, messianic Zionism, that takes over Israel slowly and gradually, first electorally, but also through the apparatus of the army, the secret service, the Mossad, the universities. All these old elites are giving in to a new kind of messianic Zionism that is far more powerful than the secular, old liberal so to speak, Zionism. Both of them believed in apartheid Israel, but they had different versions of apartheid Israel. And so I think, again, I don't like tactical commentary, whether gallant, it matters so much. Not because I don't respect this kind of commentary. I'm just, maybe because I'm an historian, I'm much more interested in the wider picture. And the wider picture is that this internal implosion is another crack in the structure, and a very important crack. And the 7th of October widened extensively that crack as well. And I think that's something to follow and look at. As for Colombia, Muslim Zionists, I wouldn't pay too much attention to this phenomenon because we know the names of all of them. As for Colombia and the global South, yes, it is. Of course, it is very important. We have this global Israel and global Palestine, and we have the beginning of countries in the global South willing to go beyond boycott and divestment into real sanction, ceding diplomatic relationship. We need the global North to follow. But maybe that's the historical process. You begin with the global South, you move to the civil society in the global North, and hopefully the country, also the states, the governments in the future of the global North would do this. We need this kind of isolation. We need this kind of pressure. And we need, and that's very difficult to ask the people in Gaza and the West Bank, but we need to hold our breath because it will take a bit of time for this to unfold, but it's not fair to say to the people who need this, not tomorrow, but yesterday. So we have to double and triple also our efforts, at least to get some hope for the end of the genocide, even if it doesn't mean yet the kind of liberation that we are all dreaming about.
Thank you.
Yeah.